Under the warm golden lights that always cast a false sense of peace over Fairmont Crest, where spotless streets and perfectly trimmed lawns seemed to boast about order and control, the story of Martin began to veer in a direction no one was prepared for. For years, the name Martin had been synonymous with the word trustworthy. He appeared at every community meeting as a balancing voice, always calm, composed, never revealing even the slightest crack in the image everyone had grown accustomed to. To Smitty, Martin was not just a partner, but a refuge after long days, living proof that in a world full of lies, there was still a man who kept his promises. To the rest of Fairmont Crest, Martin resembled an invisible pillar. Not loud, not showy, but it was his very stability that made people believe some things in life were immutable. They were used to seeing him walk beside Smitty at parties, used to his gentle smile and polite greetings, used to the way he listened more than he spoke, as if his life were a flat, straight line with no room for sudden, erratic turns. Yet within that seemingly flawless picture, small details quietly began slipping out of frame, and no one noticed in time. At first, it was just a few occasions when Martin complained of exhaustion, made excuses to stay late at the office, or withdrew from a gathering because of urgent matters. Smitty looked at him with more concern than suspicion, believing it was nothing more than pressure, the usual fatigue of a man who constantly shouldered the role of being everyone's support. On the nights Martin didn't come home, Smitty soothed himself with all kinds of reasonable explanations. Extended work obligations, social engagements that required his presence, or simply the private space any person might need. The community just as easily brushed it aside. For them, the image of an honest, straightforward Martin had become so ingrained that any strange sign was automatically eroded by admiration and goodwill. No one wanted to believe there was anything about him that needed questioning. Even so, unease has its own way of slipping into places where people thought they had locked every door. For Smitty, the confusion came from nameless silences between the two of them, from the way Martin's gaze sometimes drifted somewhere else, detached from the present moment, from his suddenly hesitant answers when asked about a particular evening. Each detail, taken alone, was small and harmless. But as they repeated often enough, they began to align into an odd line of disturbance across the glass surface that was presumed to be perfectly reinforced. Smitty didn't know what to call what he felt, only that something no longer fit within the picture he had trusted for so long. Those around them, who had only ever seen Martin's life through the glass doors of luxury and praise, also began to realize that there might be darker corners they had never been allowed to see. The real shock only struck when the truth stepped out of vague intuition and stood bare before the community like a tear that could never be sewn back together. People discovered that Martin was not actually gay as they had always believed. Everything they had used to define him, from the way he appeared beside Smitty to the stories repeated at gatherings, suddenly felt fragile, like a layer of mist carefully laid over to conceal the rest of who he was. It turned out that behind that calm, impeccable facade was another life built on secret meetings with a woman he had tried to hide, as if her very existence were a sin that could never be named aloud. That sense of betrayal did not just carve into Smitty's heart, it spread like an aftershock through every corner of Fairmont Crest. For Smitty, every shared memory suddenly transformed into footage needing to be replayed from the beginning. The evenings when Martin claimed he was too exhausted to talk, the times he squeezed Smitty's hand in reassurance while his eyes slipped away, the meetings suddenly cancelled, all of it took on a different hue. These were no longer signs of an overburdened man, but hazy fragments of a carefully maintained deception. Smitty didn't just lose faith in Martin, he also lost faith in his own instincts, in his ability to recognize the truth in the person he thought he knew best. The rest of the Fairmont Crest community did not escape that sense of vertigo either. They realized that for years, what they had cherished might not have been the real Martin, but the version of him they had collectively constructed and draped over him, a neat, easy-to-understand version that fit the molds this place always upheld. The fact that he had been living in two worlds at once, one public world at Smitty's side, and another secret world with this woman, forced everyone to ask themselves what, if anything, they actually knew about him beyond what he had allowed them to see. Fairmont Crest's lights still shone as usual, parties still unfolded with wine and smiles, but beneath that glitter, whispers grew louder about how many other secrets might be hidden inside homes that seemed perfectly in order. Every time Martin pretended to be tired, every apology about unexpected obligations, every tender gesture of care towards Smitty, once seen as proof of love and devotion, now became elusive details that no one quite knew how to read. Were they signs of genuine attentiveness, or methodical efforts to soothe his own guilt? Each action, each glance, each word from the past was pulled out of its old context and placed into a new frame of suspicion. Had Martin tried to compensate for what he was hiding with longer than usual embraces, with gentler than necessary words of comfort? Or was he simply living two roles at once? The reliable partner at home and a completely different man once he stepped beyond the gates of Fairmont Crest? Meanwhile, the silhouette of the mysterious woman remained completely absent, an intentional blank space with no explanation. No one knew who she was, where she came from, or how she entered Martin's life. The silence surrounding her identity only fueled the community's imagination. Some suspected she was a manipulator, using affection to pull Martin away from the life he was living. Others believed she might be the only person who had truly seen the real man beneath his facade, the catalyst forcing him to confront the part of himself he had long tried to bury. Theories piled up, but they all ran aground at the same point: no one possessed the full truth. That mystery turned the whole situation heavier. If Martin had simply changed his orientation or decided on a different life path, people might have been able to file it away as a personal upheaval. But the fact that he tied this shift to an unnamed woman with a face never seen in public pushed everything beyond the boundary of a private choice. People started talking about ambition, about the possibility that the relationship had been engineered, about the idea that Fairmont Crest might be only one piece in a much larger plan whose end no one could see. The turmoil didn't stem from what had been confirmed, but from the blank spaces between the things left unsaid. For Smitty, the pain did not lie solely in the revelation that Martin had another life, but in the question he now had to ask himself: in all these years, what was real and what was performance? Was there any moment in their history untouched by the shadow of that other secret world? The times Martin held his hand in front of everyone, the evenings they sat together under Fairmont Crest's warm lights sharing what felt like intimate stories. Had those been genuine, or had they been part of a mask worn for so long that even the wearer no longer distinguished where it ended? That question dragged Smitty into a spiral of obsession, where every memory was both precious and suspect at the same time. For the other residents, watching Martin fall from the pedestal they had put him on also forced them to examine themselves. They realized how easily they had accepted a narrative simply because it was convenient and beautiful. They believed Martin was gay not because he stood up and openly defined himself, but because every detail surrounding his life made that conclusion reasonable and comfortable for everyone. It was just like the way Fairmont Crest preferred orderly stories, fixed roles, and neatly classified people who wouldn't disturb the calm surface. The existence of that unseen woman, though she had never appeared physically, was enough to shatter that order. She compelled everyone to accept that human beings are far more complicated than the roles a community assigns to them. As rumors flowed across thresholds and gardens in this affluent enclave, the biggest question remained unanswered: what was Martin truly searching for? Love, freedom from the image he had lived in for too long, or a desperate need to prove to himself that he was not constrained by any label? No one had the answer, because only Martin knew what had driven him to risk everything: the trust of Smitty, the respect of the community, and the very stability he once embodied, to walk a path he could only travel in the dark. For that reason, this story is not simply a scandalous affair rocking Fairmont Crest. It is like a mirror reflecting what this place has always tried not to see. That luxury cannot fully cover loneliness, that safe roles can become burdens, and that beneath every carefully polished smile may be an entire inner world no one ever touches. Martin, once seen as the model of transparency and integrity, has now become the clearest example of how a person can live within so many layers of armor that no one, not even themselves, can say for sure where their true self begins. And in that unresolved space, Fairmont Crest keeps its lights on, keeps hosting parties with overflowing glasses and half-finished stories. People still walk past the house that used to symbolize an unshakable relationship and wonder how many truths its walls have heard that never made it into words. Meanwhile, the shadow of the mysterious woman and all the unanswered questions hover over the community's air like a cloud that refuses to dissipate, a constant reminder that sometimes the most frightening thing is not the truth that has been revealed, but all the missing pieces around it, those parts no one knows will ever be told in full. Thank you all for your loyal support and listening.